you for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman. Today's episode is brought to you by my good friends at Booking Protect, the global leaders in refund protection. Any listing, any sector, anywhere, Booking Protect has you covered with the world's most comprehensive refund protection product. To find out how you and your organization can partner with Booking Protect to deliver world-class customer service, a better, more personalized buying experience, and how you can generate a new stream of revenue for your organization, visit them at www.bookingprotect.com. Once again, that email address is, or the web address is www.bookingprotect.com. Are you going to see us at Intix in New York City on January 20th to 23rd? You can find me. You can find Simon and Kat. We're going to be at the Booking Protect booth. And you're going to want to come to New York because this is the first time in 26 years that Intix will be in New York City at the Hilton. Such a big event that they had to add an extra day. If you go to the intix.org website, you're going to see my mug plastered right there. I'm doing a couple talks, leading a couple sessions. It's going to be a great chance to connect with me, Simon, Kat, my buddy Danny Frank, who is one of the chairs of the committee, Kyle Wright from Schubert Organization. You're going to see great people like my friends like Derek Palmer. I know Angela Higgins from the TPC in Australia is coming. Make sure you get your tickets to Intix by visiting intix.org. Go there. Get your tickets today. Have you signed up for my new newsletter? Talking Tickets, 5 top stories from the world of tickets from the week that was, with a quick analysis by me. My team pulls together this thing every week. It's great. You can get that by visiting my website, davewakeman.com, and clicking on the links that says Get Talking Tickets. I'm going to be doing a giveaway with some tickets to Intix, some registrations for the conference, I believe. So you want to get signed up for Talking Tickets so you can find out how you can win those tickets. My guest today is back for round 2. It's Sam Sherman from Broker Genius. We had a nice conversation that was a little bit different than our first time because we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about the value. We talked about the Viagogo StubHub deal. We talked about new breeds of brokers. We talked about data and protection of data. We talked about consolidation and its impact on the primary market and the secondary market. We talked about the future of the ticket market. We talked about pricing. We talked about secondary to secondary sales. We talked about all kinds of stuff. It's really great conversation. This is a bit different than the first time we chatted. It's kind of covers a whole lot of different territory, right? So I think you're going to dig this conversation with Sam Sherman from Broker Genius on the Business of Fun podcast. All right, I want to welcome back Sam Sherman from Broker Genius to the Business of Fun podcast. Sam, how's it going, man?
Doing well, Dave. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I told you before, which if anybody listened to the Tammy Gaw episode, I had the flu or something, and I had been knocked out, but I'm good now. Coming through strong, so hopefully we're going to have a good conversation to take advantage of all this new energy I have.
Sounds good.
All right. Now, you've been here before, so we don't have to do all the introductory stuff. We can jump right into it.
Sure.
The first thing I want to ask you about is big news in the world of tickets. Viagogo bought StubHub last week, and this is the first time I've had a chance to talk to anybody about the purchase except for the BBC, which the link is going to be in the show notes for this.
Sure.
But give me your ideas on the Viagogo purchase of StubHub, because I think that it's interesting. I do a lot of business in Europe, in the UK, and all over the world. So I don't know if everybody's as well versed in Viagogo as they maybe need to be. But I want to hear your opinion on what the deal means to the secondary market.
Sure. So I think that it is the best case scenario that could possibly have happened to the secondary ticket market. Back in 2012, before I started Broker Genius, by chance, I had been introduced to Eric Baker, who's the CEO of and founder of Viagogo, and of course also the original one of the co-founders of StubHub. And so we met and we got to talking, and I was very, very close actually to joining Viagogo and working for Eric. I got to know him a little bit during that time. What I can tell you from what I remember, and obviously this is a long time ago, is that he really thinks like a broker. He came up that way. He started Liquid Seats, if I remember correctly, was before StubHub back in like 1999. Him and Jeff Fleur, there was no question that he has a really, really good understanding of the secondary market from a broker point of view. Obviously, from an exchange point of view, he's built two of the most successful ticket exchanges that have ever been created. The interesting thing, we have an office in Barcelona. That's where our development actually takes place in Spain. So, I travel to Europe a decent amount. And I think most people are aware that Viagogo is the dominant brand pretty much in every country outside of North America, in Europe. I think we're all very, there obviously remains to be seen, but I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think that for companies like Broker Genius and for ticket brokers, the international opportunity, I think, is going to open up. And I think that, I have a feeling, and we'll see, that over the course of the next year or so, that Viagogo is going to open up the international opportunity to U.S. brokers who I think as Viagogo gets, their bearings and learns more about the space, which I'm sure they know a lot about already, and how well capitalized a lot of ticket brokers are and how well positioned they are to really grow that segment of the business. I think there's going to be an opportunity for ticket brokers to grow internationally. Brokers have tried to do that before. It hasn't worked out that well. But I think that that's one of the most exciting things for ticket brokers, I think, to look forward to is they talk about globalization, and a lot of people are thinking from an international brand, creating synergies, reducing some of the same, some of the same activities and having a more efficient cost structure for the two companies. And that's definitely true. But I think that for brokers, the ability to take positions in other markets is something that I think has a lot of potential. Obviously, there's a lot of laws internationally in Europe in particular that are going to be somewhat of a barrier. But I do think that there is a real opportunity there to open up that market. And I think that with the technology that StubHub has already in both point of sale and processing technology and capabilities, and then of course all the third parties that exist in the space, that's something that can be leveraged to allow brokers to grow their businesses internationally and vice versa. So I think that the globalization here applies also to the entrants and to the participants in the ticket resale space, and that's something that I think is that I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out over the course of the next year. And I think that, again, from knowing Eric a little bit, I haven't spoken to him, since that time. He's a really, really smart guy, knows what he's doing, and I think comes to this with a broker-centric approach. Obviously, I'm sure that they're going to be working with content rights holders too, of course, but I do think that this is going to be a very good thing for ticket brokers.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things that probably strike me, and I can hear my inbox blowing up right now, even as we haven't even finished recording the podcast now, because all these people that I know around the world are going to be emailing me going, Viagogo is awful. They're so bad. They're terrible for consumers, and that's going to be, to me, going to be one of the biggest challenges that they're going to face. Is, are they going to be a lot more customer friendly, like StubHub and some of the other platforms are in the States, or are they going to continue kind of their scorched earth pattern that they have internationally? That's one question. But the other thing you brought up, or actually you brought up a couple of good points. The second important point that you brought up was the idea of being broker-centric, which I don't necessarily know if everybody's going to view that as being a positive for the industry, but that's we can talk about that. But then the third thing is that I think the international and the globalization of the secondary market, at least selfishly, would be great for me, because I've often said that the secondary market can be a very valuable partner. I even said it on the BBC again the other day, if it's done wisely. But I think the problem is education. So sure. I'm all about this. But I want to ask you a little bit about,
some of the barriers that they're going to face? Because you talked about a lot of the positives, but at the same time, if there's a bunch of positives, what are some of the negative aspects of the deal? And specifically, the Viagogo name may be the biggest in the international markets, but it also comes with it a certain negative image.
Sure. And I think that you take the positive sides for each one of the companies, and StubHub has just a fantastic name for consumers. And I think that's one of the biggest assets that they were buying. So I think that how the branding shakes up or takes shape over the next year to 2 years post the deal. Does StubHub retain that StubHub name in North America? Obviously StubHub has a presence in the UK, and they've got some European presence. What happens to that? Is it going to be Viagogo there and it's basically status quo or not? But I do think that leveraging StubHub's, the way that they've been able to create a very consumer-centric brand, and a very positive brand is something that's going to help Viagogo. And I think that probably, I would assume, again, I'm not on the inside of this deal, that they're going to take some time to really learn the StubHub business and what they do well and what their strongest assets are, and that they'll learn hands-on the customer-centric approach, which I think they'll probably be able to benefit a lot from. So I do think that's something that can help Viagogo in this acquisition.
Yeah, and it kind of opens the door to something that we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, which is kind of maybe brokers or just people in general are nervous about the future of the market, right? And I know that depending on where you sit, and I think everybody knows probably both of our points of view on this, but if not, we can both share them in a second. The first thing is is there a need for brokers? Which I know that, it's going to be no secret that you're going to say yes, there is a need for brokers. And I've probably been pretty vocal about my saying that I think there's a definite role for brokers. But looking at it through the lens of this huge acquisition and some of the actions that have been taken by the primary market, or even some of the actions being taken internationally, where do you see the need for brokers in the world today? And, what kind of value do they provide? Because recently I had Patrick Ryan on a couple months back now, and we talked a lot about the value. So I'd be curious to hear your opinion about the value of a broker in the ticket ecosystem now, especially in light of all this stuff.
Sure. And I know Patrick well. He's actually a really good guy. Him and Nick, before they were Eventellect, when they were the ticket experience, they were like our first beta customer. We had a really close relationship, and we still, keep in touch a little bit now and then, obviously different sides of the business, but, a lot of people have strong opinions there because of consolidation and certainly understand that. But I do have a lot of respect for Patrick. But in any case, in terms of my perspective on, the future of the industry and the role that the ticket brokers, play, I think that there are many reasons why brokers will continue to serve a role within the ticket landscape. And you can go through several, that I think are not going to change. But number one, brand protection for artists and teams. I don't think that changes that much. I think that, whether you're the New York Yankees, whether you are Taylor Swift, whatever brand you care a lot about what consumers think about your brand. In fact, a lot of those companies are spending a lot of money right now on NLP, natural language processing, for social media to be able to gauge what the sentiment for their brands are. And I know a little bit about that because we're doing that as we expand our technology to include that as well. But the point is that for a lot of the brands, they're not going to put their inventory out at get-in prices that they think would be harmful for their brand, and they'd rather the brokers, capture some of the margin there and let the public's perception be that these are ticket brokers. And I think that's something that still exists to a large degree today. There could be some change there with, as consumers go to Ticketmaster and are looking at blue dots and red dots and not really paying all that much attention to what's primary and secondary, that could change that a little bit. It's been a while and it hasn't. So, that's why I think it's going to be a while longer. But that need of brand protection, I think, still is intact. The second, in terms of laying off risk, listen, they're not in the sports teams, the content rights holders are not necessarily in the business of capturing every single penny on the ticket that they sell. Certainly they don't want to be leaving 50% on the table, but I think that there is a large sentiment out there that says, you know what, if you can provide value to me by, number one, having the operation, number two, pricing it efficiently, number three, laying off the risk for me, there's a lot of reasons there that the teams still find value with the brokers, and so that I think still exists. In the case of brokers, in the case of an on sale or tickets being sold at the beginning of the season, there's a lot of value of cash in hand and being able to get that money right away. And brokers are certainly helpful in that area versus, only capturing their money back over time. So time value of money is another element. Certainly ineffective pricing is a big reason. Now that certainly can change with dynamic pricing and has changed to a large degree with dynamic pricing on the primary market. But of course, brokers are still able to capture a lot of margin, and we're still seeing that overall our segment of brokers continue to grow year over year, and margins, while they're shrinking in a lot of categories, they remain strong in other categories. So whereas sports, in certain sports, have gone down a lot over the last year, overall, our margins for brokers have actually maintained over the last couple of years, and our clients have grown by 7% year over year, even though there are still a lot of clients that have shrunk. But overall, from our customer base, which right now represents about $2.2 billion worth of sales per year, there is overall growth. And again, that's in the face of everything. So I still think that there is a clear need for brokers in those areas. And then finally, contractual obligations, while that can change, there's a lot of restrictions that content rights holders have right now to distribute their inventory, even if they had pricing, even if they had operational help, even if they were not concerned about laying off the risk. They still have contractual obligations a lot of times not to be able to sell on all of the various different exchanges. And there are so many exchanges that play a very important role in the marketplace right now between, StubHub, Vivid Seats, Ticketmaster, Ticket Network, SeatGeek, TickPick, Game Time, all of these, and all of these companies in different markets play a really important role. And, obviously the big 4 or 5 are a huge chunk of the market. And in fact, the retail exchanges account for 93% of all tickets that sell amongst our client base. So of those top 9 exchanges, that's 93% of all the tickets, and nobody has more than a 35% market share. So for those reasons and the importance of distribution, I think it's very, very important that the distribution happens on all the exchanges, and if there's contractual reasons why they can't, that's another reasons why brokers will continue and need to continue to exist. So for all those reasons, I think that while there's certainly plenty of things to be concerned about, there's also plenty of reasons to think that there is longevity for the next number of years for ticket brokers.
I think the ideas that you listed, you gave for reasons for the brokers to still exist, those would be very similar to what I would give. I mean, with your number one about the brand protection being the most important, I would add one more too, which is that you need the brokers and you need the platforms in the secondary market also because they have developed a better understanding of digital marketing. And it's something that would be expensive and not necessarily guaranteed to be successful if a team or an organization started taking it over right now.
Sure.
And I would put that up there probably as the number 2 thing, right after the brand protection. Because, I mean, if you start throwing out $5 tickets and it's not coming through the secondary market, it gets ugly fast. I mean, and even on the secondary market, there's challenges, when the tickets are going down, to a buck or two, but that's a different scenario altogether and one that can be tackled with marketing, but the pricing alone, the commoditization thing, you got to be careful of because if not, you really are screwed. But that's just me.
Sure. I think you touched on a point there of from a pricing perspective and brokers also understanding how to price better. They have a feel for the market, obviously leveraging technology as well. But that's definitely an important piece. I think that, the distribution piece for the exchanges, that's something that you don't necessarily need brokers for. because the teams, if they didn't have the contractual restrictions, would be able to distribute through all of the exchanges that you mentioned that are already doing a great job of digital marketing. But I do think that the contractual restrictions in many cases are a reason that brokers need to service being the ones to deliver the content to those exchanges. On the pricing side, that's something that the different brands, sports teams in particular, so content rights holders are more focused on making sure that they're protecting their product. And that's one of the reasons that there's been a lot more consolidation, for example, in sports, is making sure that their tickets are not undervalued and that you have certain parameters, including certain floors for different types of games and different inventory types, which has, not worked out perfectly, but it's certainly made a difference in many markets. But beyond that, I think that it's more about that market efficiency on the secondary market is so close to perfect that it's letting the laws of supply and demand take shape in a zero-sum game. Because at the end of the day, tickets are a commodity, and we see that over and over again. And, you can put protections in place to restrict tickets from falling to a certain price point, and that just means that you're going to eat more inventory. It's going to be captured somewhere. And so I think that where the content rights holders, I think, are getting more educated right now is how much inventory really can be healthy to move for a particular artist for a particular event. And then there's also the element of pricing. And we've spoken, David, on past podcasts, that in the airline industry, when's the last time you ever saw an airline ticket, go down in price and tank as it got closer to the flight? Almost never, right? At the end of the day, they're able to price their inventory in a way where consumers are trained to buy their tickets in advance. And if you wait, you're going to pay more money. And, the secondary market for brokers that are taking inventory risk, then they're going to want to sell the ticket for whatever they can capture because they have no incentive if they're not a consolidator or they're not working directly with the team to eat that seed. But I think that goes along to understanding pricing and data much better to understand where in the life cycle of a ticket inventory needs to be priced. And so it makes a huge difference. Even if 10 points more of a market move from 150 days or from the public on sale until 30 days to the event, if you can move 10 points more of inventory during that period, that thinning out of supply makes a huge difference in the last 30 days to the event, leading to much less price compression and tickets, just tanking in those final days and weeks to the event. So I think that in general, the content rights holders are understanding that a lot more, and brokers are understanding that a lot more, and overall that has made the markets healthier as a result.
Well, I hope so. And you talked about the sports tickets kind of tanking, and then you opened up data, and then you opened up the fact that your point of view is that a ticket is a commodity, and my point of view would be that in the world we live in now, a ticket is a commodity, and I would say that it's due to a combination of not understanding the data, right, or using the data properly. You maybe of forgetting how to do the basics of marketing pretty well, especially on the team side, and it is like just having transparency in the market from the number of seats, which kind of brings me around to this idea, right? How do we kind of turn the market around and so we can train people to buy tickets earlier so that we don't have this race to the bottom at the end, and so that we don't have so much commodity pricing, right? So that everything's just racing down to pennies on the dollar of what it was before.
So,
hopefully there's a data answer because I'm curious because I've been trying to show people how to use data better lately, and that's sort of where I'm trying to go with this.
Sure.
Full transparency.
Sure. Listen, I agree with you. And that, for us, we certainly feel the same way. That's why we put out Atlas, which is the first version of our data product that we envision becoming like the Bloomberg terminal for event ticketing. And we're continuing to add to that and continuing to get broker feedback. So that's certainly something that we want to do is educate people and give them the data, access to data that they need to make better decisions. In terms of, tickets or events, really the problem of events tanking, if you have too much supply saturating the market, you do not have room for the market not to crash. The only way to do that is when you are protecting pricing, like where you have a consolidator with rules that you cannot move like a certain event under $40 get-ins or whatever the inventory type is. That's the only way that you can protect pricing to that degree. And again, if the market can't bear that, that means that you're going to have a lot of empty seats, and that's something that different teams will have a different perspective on. How important are butts and seats? How important is it for the stadium to look full, to be full, for fans to get that experience? And that is a huge part, I think, of this topic, because it's a fundamental question of what happens over time if you don't create opportunities for tickets to be purchased at very low price points because of what we're talking about here. If you don't allow that, then there's a lot of people when they're younger that wouldn't have the opportunity to go to a game, to go to a ball game, and to create that experience and that connection with the team. And that has an effect in later on, years down the road. And I think people are starting to talk about that now, right? But if you just let the market play out, if inventory can just be bought completely freely, then I think there is an equilibrium, because where brokers are pretty quick to learn, when they made a bad purchase, and when they buy season tickets for a team and they learn the market and they see that they're losing money, then if there's way too much saturation, which is leading them to lose money, they're not going to buy that the next year and the market will thin out. So in a pure, non-restrictive market, that will play out. When you have too much supply though, then for that period of time, for that event, then the market has nowhere to go but down. I do think that as more and more fans are buying tickets now on the secondary market, and so there's a lot more demand being generated from the secondary, then that's leading to more supply being able to be purchased through those outlets, and that thins out the market too. But ultimately, as long as the supply and demand, are close enough, then you will have stability, and brokers that sell, in that case, if they sell too early, then the brokers that sell late are going to capture, more of the margin. I still think it ends up being a zero-sum game. It's just that where is that margin going to go? Is it going to go to empty seats by restricting it? Is it going to go to brokers that capture more margin because they sell at a more opportune time? That's really how I look at that.
Yeah, and the part about if it's going to an empty seat, I look at that as sort of an expiring asset, right? And I think that every time you have an empty seat, you have a missed opportunity, and that's sort of the way. But you brought up the idea of supply, right, and having too much supply in the market, and then kind of finding a place where there's stability, right? And to me, that sounds like which goes into the second part of the original question of marketing, right? And it seems to me that one of the ways that we can do a better job of moving these sports tickets, because sports tickets have really not been holding their value very well in a lot of instances for the last several years, is the need to be more effective at marketing. I think that really it just seems like a lot of people have forgotten some of the basics of just generating demand for what they're doing, and that everything rides on this pendulum of hot or not. Mm-hmm. And to me, it probably is not necessarily in your wheelhouse as much, but how do you help people, or maybe it is, how do you help people understand that like part of the way that you stop the volatility of the pricing model is through better marketing and promotion and advertising effectively from the very start?
So, it's a good question. I think that in general, when you look at marketing, you have a question of awareness, which is of your target audience, how many people are aware that you can go to this event for this price, right? And then if you have the awareness that this concert's happening, there's a certain Broadway show, a certain sporting event, then it's a question of what's the price point for people to be interested. Because usually that price plays a role. I'm interested in going, but not at $500. I might be interested at $100. So, the awareness side, I think that for most events, there is strong awareness at least for the headliner events. I think the artists themselves have started to do a much better job engaging using social media and other platforms to engage with their fans so that they're creating more of that connection and more awareness. So they're also helping, on the marketing side. So I think that where we can sit from a data perspective is when you look at, and we're starting to do this type of analysis, you look at a specific date with a specific, like even if you look at the weather for a specific day and you look at how many events are on, the market, let's say New York City. Let's say today's December the 3rd. So you could see December 3rd, right? So on a regular Tuesday, how many events are there of stadium capacity, let's say 500 or more? How many seats are out there on the market? How many seats are being sold? And what is the correlation between too many events or so many different options as it pertains to pricing? That's a question also that's beyond just looking at it from a one event, lens. But I think that generally speaking, it seems like there has been a continued progression in marketing because of all the digital platforms that are out there and the connections that fans have with the content that they want and with what they're interested in.
Yeah, and you talked about having a hypothesis, or you didn't say it specifically, but I'll put this word in your mouth, which is that you're saying look at the data for the effect of having a hypothesis. Now, do you like to go in, when you're looking at this data, do you like to look at it and already have the hypothesis, or do you formulate the hypothesis based on what you're looking at?
So the answer is twofold. I mean, we're investing now more into AI and machine learning, but we're still finding that where those tools are best used is where you do have a good hypothesis. And a hypothesis is usually based off of, logic first and some data. And then you can test that on a much larger scale by using technology. But I think still the human brain, I guess, if you will, for people that understand a particular problem, you will usually be able to collectively hypothesize something that makes sense and then test that. And if it doesn't work, move on to another hypothesis. I think that so far in this area, that has been our approach. But we are still, just starting to get our feet wet with machine learning and AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I learned a lot about it on my recent trip to Australia because I traveled around the country, around the world now at this point, with Einar, who is the CEO of ActivityStream, and they use a lot of AI to help in a different way than you understand consumer behaviors and help people make better, not just pricing decisions, but really marketing decisions. And it's like a really, really interesting thing because if you are really smart about either like the way you look at the data like you did before, right? December 3rd in New York City, a Tuesday night, Lion King tickets are going to be a pretty good bet if you're a broker buying tickets. Lion King's great. Has been for about 20 years now. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because if you ask good questions of your data, then you get really great answers. And one of the concerns I have, though, is that people are just sort of leaping into the data without asking great questions. Mm-hmm. And so from your point of view, right, because, you gave a very specific example, how do you make it so that people understand they ask better questions of their data? Because I think that's one of the issues that people have with using the data effectively is that they don't know how to ask questions of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's a very, very, very important point. I think one of the things that we're focused on, we've done, and we're trying to continue to do it more, and continue to do it stronger and better, is putting out different content that people will look at, people will want to learn and study, and that those different types of content pieces will make them think, wow, and they'll apply it to a different scenario. So like whether it's, taking the last 3 years of Thanksgiving tickets for the Detroit Lions and looking at that data in, when they were 6-6, when, different records, trying to understand things from a corollary perspective. And then that, if you give a good scenario that someone can relate to, that oftentimes will lead them to think, well, that's interesting. What if I looked at this in a different way? So what we're trying to do is put out content that spawns the thought and the creativity, and creative problem solving, and then also giving them the tools, that they have at their disposal to be able to study the data in the right way. And part of that is obviously making sure you have, huge quantities of data, but it's also making sure that it's, presented to them in a way that they can analyze it properly.
Yeah, contextual data is going to be the real winner here. And so, if you have the content, you have the tools, hopefully you're going to be creative enough, because I think that's really where you will enable yourself to differentiate from other brokers or from other people who are trying to create value in the ecosystem, is by having context and having a point of view, right? And, both of us have points of view. So, we understand that thing pretty well. But what that kind of brings up too is that there's sort of a new breed of broker that's come around, where these tools and this content and contextual data and all of these things make a lot more sense. Typically, they're going to be a little bit more tech savvy, and they're going to have a little bit different point of view. How is this new breed of broker kind of impacting the secondary market, and I guess the whole ticket market for that matter?
Sure. Yeah, there was a great article that was actually just put out on the Atlantic it was November 26th that there was talked about the new ticket scalpers are young, unashamed, and very online. That was the title of the article. And we've seen it a lot with some of partners that we have. We have partnerships with Ticket Flipping and Ticket Resale Team, which are great companies that provide educational tools to this new breed of brokers. And so, what we're seeing, so we've been seeing this now for about, I would say, a year and a half, where, a lot of very young, young 20s and sometimes even younger, they're coming into the market because there's a very strong emotional connection, first and foremost, to the asset. So there's a lot of opportunities out there to buy and sell inventory, e-commerce, sneakers, whatever, right? And I think that the emotional connection that the consumers today have with their favorite artists or with their favorite sports teams, that is a very strong emotional connection. I think that is a big part of this, in my opinion. I also think that they're very tech savvy. And so I think that if you kind of have to boil it down to what's happening here, is that there is an arbitrage opportunity that they're finding for an educated consumer versus a non-educated consumer. And this new breed is really trading the spread between what they're able to capture by being an educated consumer and a non-educated consumer. Now, that's not true of everything. Sometimes it's luck on, did I get in line first at the on sale? But they're also, just general arbitrage between Ticketmaster and the secondary market, on the primary to the secondary, and they understand how the markets actually behave. That is leading them to opportunities. And so we're finding a lot more entrants coming into the market this way. And a lot of them grow very, very fast and become brokers, just like everybody else in the market. So it's interesting. I think a lot of what's happened also is that, for example, the Bot Act has and different legislation that has restricted bots from being used, and has really, to a large degree, taken care of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but to a large degree, it has really helped. And that inventory that was, once moving all to just a very, very few subset of the market is now being spread out so that these new entrants have an opportunity to participate. Same thing also with, different things that Ticketmaster's doing and what the artists are doing as well, verified fan and things of that nature. That also creates some of the opportunity. But that's how we've kind of seen it over the last, year or so.
Yeah. And I think that one of the big opportunities for anybody, which, the Atlantic article I'm included in the Talking Tickets newsletter, but this idea of understanding how the market's going to behave. This is something that my friend Mike Guffrey talks about all the time, and I think he's talked about it on every time he's been on the podcast. It's that, you got to understand exactly how the market's going to behave, and put your inventory and your marketing efforts behind those points where there is the opportunity to capture some of these purchases. And I think that's one of the huge opportunities that all this stuff you're talking about with data and using the data better or making better pricing decisions can really be captured, because a lot of times the on sale date is a huge opportunity, right? And then there's going to be certain PR or storytelling parts in the cycle that are going to be really huge. And it seems like people just don't necessarily recognize what those points are. It's like they don't understand the arc of the event sale process. And that's what these new, some of these new brokers do really, really well, is they just understand the ups and downs of the market. So hey, look, I'm going to pull back on this because for the next 3 weeks, there's nothing going to happen anyway.
Sure. And that's actually another part of the market right now that we're seeing a lot more is secondary to secondary. And there's a lot of categories of secondary to secondary, but for brokers, for example, that they bought a huge position for whatever tour just went on sale, and they, will sell whatever chunk they can over that 3 to 4 day period post the public on sale until the lull. And then at that point, they might be willing to sell at cost or even below cost because they don't want to hold on to their capital for another 3 to 5 months. And so brokers are willing to trade that. So sometimes there's, I think, a mix of both not understanding the data, but also there are brokers that do understand it, but that their model is different. And so if you have two different types of brokers that have the same understanding, but they have different business models, one wants to churn and burn and they'd rather, sell at 10 to 12%, but continue to turn over their capital multiple times versus someone that just wants to make only 20 to 25% margin, that still creates opportunity where they can basically trade with each other. And we're seeing a lot more of that happening on the secondary as well.
Yeah, that area of the secondary to secondary, or some of the people who are operating in the lower margins, that's like a really interesting thing that's going on. And I've had a chance to learn about it a little bit more over the last year, and it's like really, it is interesting because the cost of capital is a real consideration for a lot of people, and I don't think that all the time it's necessarily given the full weight of attention that it deserves. But let me kind of shift on you just a little bit because you brought up a couple of ideas, and I kind of want to focus this last little bit on how all of this stuff is going to impact the primary market, right? And because there's been a lot of stuff going on. You talked about verified fan earlier. We talked about consolidation, and consolidation being a tool to control pricing and control the flow of inventory and price floors and all these fun things. Where is all this stuff going in your point of view? What are some of we're coming up on 2020, and I'll start doing my annual predictions and review things coming up. But where do you see things going? Especially as in returns of the primary market and trying to capture every last cent in every in every event, in every game, or in every concert.
Sure.
That was an artful question.
Sure. No, it's a great question.
Almost a monologue.
If I knew the answer, clearly, then, I think that I'd be doing something else. But, the best that I can hypothesize from the understanding that I do have of the market, is that the primary, simply put, I think is going to follow the content rights holders. Well, because what is the primary? Right? The primary, if you look at Ticketmaster and, Access and whatever, if you look at, any of those outlets, at the end of the day, they're there to service their customers who are the content rights holders. So the primary market of exchanges will follow the content rights holders. Now, where will the content rights holders go to the future? I do think that what we're seeing is that they are, and you see that with sports teams first, that they are the ones that first said, you know what, we understand how much margin we're losing. And by the way, I think a lot of that has to do with the data that they were able to gather from the relationships that they have with different exchanges. And so they understood more, right, what the opportunity cost was and how much they were leaving on the table. And that's why they acted first. I think that artists are also understanding that better now. And I don't think, though, that the reaction has been the same, primarily because I think they are much more concerned about the brand protections even more than the teams. And so I don't think that there is a major shift amongst artists from what I get from the people that I talk to. And I'm not in the primary nearly as much as probably you and others are. But it does seem from the people that I'm talking to that is the way that they feel, is that the artists are they're not like jumping on capturing every dollar. They want to be able to make sure that on the primary that they are dynamically pricing better so that they are not leaving huge amounts of money on the table. But I think that they're okay with leaving some margin for brokers as long as they serve that role of protecting the brand, of laying off risk, of getting their money up front. The other thing that's very, very different here is how convoluted the music space is when it comes to ticketing. So, for example, there are so many different types of relationships that a promoter can have with their ticketing platform and that they both have with the venue and how they have that back with the artist. So, as a result, a lot of times, whether it's Live Nation, the promoter, or the manager, whoever's in charge of pricing, they're the ones that are laying off the risk, right? Not the actual artist. Now, there's a rev share component and other dynamics that still make them care about it, but it's not to the same extent because to a large degree, they've already captured a lot of their money up front. So then it becomes the question of whoever's taking that risk, in this case, the promoter, right, of capturing a lot more of that margin. But that's why that's different than a sport, very different than a sports team. And that's why I think that's, a reason at least as to why it has not moved in the same direction as fast.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well because there's a clear line, right? There is, you see some of the artists that have done historically a better job of building a relationship with their fan base, right? So, the classic example is the Grateful Dead. The current example would probably be someone like Pearl Jam. They don't need any help from the secondary market whatsoever, right? They absolutely, they can sell whatever they want to, right? Whenever they want to. They've done a great job. But then you see the other examples, which is like, and I know a great example of this was Katy Perry the last time she went on tour, which is like she very upfront, probably protecting the brand. Somewhere in the middle is Taylor Swift. Mm-hmm. Right. And she had done a great job of developing her brand. And I think that like some of the actions she's taken with this current album are a direct reflection of I was right and she was wrong. Because like some of the gimmicks she pulled with the verified fan and the boosts and all these things, I think it had a really bad impact on her brand and her relationship with her fans on the last tour when she was like manipulating and I'm not saying, I guess dynamically would be the term you'd use, but she was tricking her fans. Like you gotta buy the boost, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. And you're gonna get the best opportunity at tickets. And then she'd sell tickets right next to them at deep, deep discounts, which is like a very bad move, right? That'll be, let me plug my upcoming Intix thing, discounts or don't discounts. That's a joke. But how do you come back from something like that? Like, let's say if you pick one side or the other, where's the line? Like, what's the right way to approach it?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, and I know this is going to be artist by artist, right?
Right. I mean, you got to put out really good music on a consistent basis, which, she's able to do. So, she's got a strong fan base and listen, from a business perspective, how much money did she make on the 2018 tour? $100-something million. I mean, it was ridiculous how much further ahead she was versus anybody else. There was a cost to that. And I think that is really that balance is what we kind of spoke about earlier. It's the same balance with sports teams. It's a question of protecting the brand. What is the cost to capturing more dollars today, even if there was a clear path to do it, but at the expense of being perceived in a certain way that's negative and not creating the same brand connections for people that wouldn't be able to afford it at a certain price point. Listen, I'm not in the artist world. Obviously, I think that that's something that they continue that artists that are doing this will continue to have to ask for themselves. I think that one of the differences, by the way, though, for a sports team and an artist is that they don't have the same longevity. Right? So they don't necessarily have to look at something in 10, 15, 20-year cycles. They can maybe look at it in a shorter period, and that might also influence their decision.
Yeah, that's true. It's all. I mean, it goes back to a word you used earlier, which is context. Right? The context that you make your decision in is very important because if you're an artist, you're looking at you have a career. If you're trying to have a long career, you maybe have 20 or 25 years in front of you. If you are a a boy band, right? You might only be looking at a timeline of I need to make all of my money in this 4 or 5 years because I can't necessarily guarantee it. If you're a team, right, and you're rebuilding, you might be like, how do I just hang on for the next 2 or 3 years while I get all my prospects together, right? And the context of these things is very, very important. And I only use the examples of Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, and Pearl Jam just because I know that those are very familiar to people.
Sure. But to your point, though, Dave, I mean, like Pearl Jam's been around for a lot longer than the others, right? Than the others, and I mean, I think that like that's where brands like Metallica, if you're able to like be successful for 30 years, I do think that that's something that some artists now are starting to think about as they think about their life cycle of how long they're going to be out there making money on tour, and the long term effect of that revenue. But I do think that you bring up that point about a boy band, for example, like that would be a very big difference, right?
BTS might not be around in 3 years.
That's right. That's right. So I think that certainly is going to have an effect on the way that different artists will look at the space and ticketing.
Yeah, no, it's great. And you know what was awesome that came out of this was you talk about protecting the brand, and nobody really talks. And I'm the only one who usually talks about protecting the brand all the time. So that was really great because most of the time when I don't think that people pay that nearly enough attention, right? All the ideas about not discounting or controlling the way you discount or controlling where your inventory comes because of brand protection. If people only got that out of this conversation, I think they would have got their money's worth out of the podcast today. But Sam, where can we point people so if they want to find out more about what you're up to?
They can go to our website, brokergenius.com. They can certainly reach out to anybody if they want to have a conversation to sales@brokergenius.com. And certainly anybody on my team would be happy to talk to them and educate them on what we do.
Yeah, and don't forget the @BrokerGenius on Twitter as well, because you do a great job of tweeting out stuff and engaging with folks there as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave.
Hey, I'm here for you. I'm nothing but a marketer, Sam.
I appreciate it, yes.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for doing the podcast, man.
All right, you too, Dave. Good talking to you.
What did you think of my conversation with Sam Sherman? Let me know by sending me an email at my name, dave@davewakeman.com. You can visit my website. It's davewakeman.com where you can find out what I'm up to. There is a blog. There is links to media appearances. There are client lists, ideas, all kinds of great stuff. Visit davewakeman.com. You can connect with me on the social media. You can find me by searching my name, Dave Wakeman, on LinkedIn, and you can follow me on Twitter where I'm @David Wakeman. I should probably check because it's after January or December 10th. That @Dave Wakeman Twitter handle may have freed up and I didn't get it. That would make me mad. As always, I would love it if you would subscribe to the Business Fun Podcast. If you dig what I'm doing, I'd love it if you'd share an episode with your colleagues, your friends, people you think might learn something from some of these conversations, like the one today with Sam Sherman, or the recent ones with Tammy Gaw, Martin Gameltoff, Richard Howell, Simon Mabb, Kat Spencer, any of these people, Derek Palmer. Tons of great content. If you think somebody's going to gain something and learn something from it, I'd love it if you'd share it with them. I'd dig it if you'd subscribe, and if you would leave a review. It helps. All these things move me up in the rankings, and they help make sure that people discover the Business of Fun podcast. As always, I want to thank Booking Protect for being fantastic partners in all these different things that I do. You should be checking out Simon and Kat at bookingprotect.com to find out how you can partner with them. Make sure you come check us out at Intix in New York on the 20th to the 23rd of January. And spoiler alert, if I get my act together, starting on Monday, I think we're going to have a little surprise giveaway for people who sign up for the Talking Tickets newsletter, which you can get by clicking on the link at my news on my website at davewakeman.com. As always, I want to thank you for being here and being a part of the Business of Fun podcast. If you have ideas, questions, comments, potential guests, send them to me at an email, dave@davewakeman.com. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.